Welcome to another mind-blowing edition of Slick Daddy's Open Bar. And today we have a special guest, Dwight Douglas, who, we've talked in the past about people that were not so great friends to radio. Well, this is a guy that's been a great radio contributor as a programmer, as a consultant. The guy's written books. He's worked with Howard Stern. He started out working with Fred Rogers on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And what the hell is he doing on this podcast? How you doing, Dwight?
I'm doing great.
Great.
Sitting down here in Florida, just banning books and burning brawls.
Yeah, that's insane, isn't it? Jesus. These people are crazy.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So you started out in Pittsburgh, working for Mr. Rogers there. You went to college. You got a job on the TV show, right, on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
Yeah, I was working at the college radio station, and a lot of my buddies, worked other jobs, obviously, while they were in college, part-time jobs. And one of the great opportunities that was presented to us was that WQED Channel 13, which produces Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood,
Right.
had a lot of openings for tech. I was a telecine operator, which is kind of an unused term at this point in media, but it was the guy that dealt with all the film footage and the slides that were used. Today, supers are put on digitally. Back in the old days, we literally had slides that had the person's name in white on a black background, and you would fade up on that to bring a slide into a news program or whatever. And then the film, we used lots of 16 millimeter film, so there was some film editing as well. But the biggest joy of working with Rogers' Neighborhood was learning how to put together a show from a script all the way into a final production, and it was very educational.
Now, was Fred Rogers, was he the tyrant that we all understand that he was? How was he to work with?
That's very funny. No, it's very funny. Fred Rogers was the kindest, most gentle person. First of all, he was a Presbyterian minister before he got into the media business.
Right.
And he was a very godly person. And, when someone would have a bad take in the studio and swear, he would be, do we have that language? Okay, let's do it again. I mean, he really was a very soft, wonderful person. And he and his wife would go up to Hidden Valley, Pennsylvania every summer. And he literally was like Moses. He came down from the mountain with all these scripts. It's like I never forget seeing him walk in from the parking lot with Lego tablets, Lego pads in both arms. And these were the scripts for all the shows for the whole season.
Wow.
And, you give it to the secretary and she would type it up, and then they would go through table reads. And it was a very elaborate production, and it was very, very well done. And Michael Keaton worked there. His name at the time was Michael Douglas. He was a stagehand and did some part-time camera work for the show.
No kidding. The actor, Michael Keaton.
Yeah, well, yeah, he's from, I think, Castle Shannon, Pennsylvania. I'm from Brentwood.
Okay.
The point is that his name was Michael Douglas. He went to Kent State, and he was there during the shootings and came back home because a lot of people left Kent State at that point.
Right.
And he was a speech major, and he wanted to get into show business. So he left Pittsburgh and went to Hollywood, and the rest is history. But when he went to SAG, Screen Actors Guild, to register his name, they said, hey, you can't have Michael Douglas. There's already a Mike Douglas in TV, and there's a Michael Douglas, the movie actor. You can't use that name. So he said, okay, I'll be back. And he walks around the corner, and he sees the magazine with Keaton's picture, the actress. And he says, that's a good Hollywood name. So he went back and said, okay, Michael Keaton. And that's how he gets the name Keaton.
Wow, that's a great story. Michael Keaton, you worked with him.
Uh-huh.
How'd you end up in radio? How'd you end up in this crazy business? You started out as a jock? Is that what happened?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny. My father, during the war, was a master sergeant, and he was in charge of putting up all the telephone poles from France all the way into Germany because they had to, reconnect their communication systems. So he was really into technology, and when he came back from Europe after the war, he attended the Chicago Radio School for about a year. Finally, my mother said, "This is too much. You can't be away this much. You got to come home." So he left. But I grew up in a household where there were TVs and radios torn apart all around the house. So I got into it actually on a technical level. I had my little night kit radio station when I was 9 or 10 years old, and I transmitted, put a wire up the cherry tree in the backyard, and transmitted to the neighborhood. And so I would say that my first step into radio was more from the technical aspect, and then when I got to college, I ran into a bunch of great people at Point Park College, which is now Point Park University, and worked at the radio station. I worked there so much, I was the worst student in America, for sure, because I didn't go to class much. Right. That led to me getting a job offer. I first had a job offer at WAMO to work the all-night show there, and I worked there for a while. And then after that collapsed, as many radio stations do, I then went to WDVE as a production director and part-time jock, which then developed into a full-time PD job.
Oh, what year are we talking here, Dwight?
That was 1869. No,
come on.
It was DVE went live in 1971, 72. I was there, and lasted there. Had some good ratings, had a great staff, and then of course I was hired away to WYDD to put a station on against DVE, and that was successful for about a half a rating book, and then we all left there. And then I worked as a creative production guy at 13Q with Bill Tanner. That was a trip. Bill Tanner,
that was the Bill Tanner that ended up at Y100 in Miami, right? Same guy?
That's right. That's right. He's now the late, great Bill Tanner. He passed away a few years ago.
Oh,
anyway, so I learned a lot there, and then Abrams called me and said, "Hey, we want you to go to Washington to do DC 101." And Denise Oliver was already there, and I knew her from Pittsburgh and upstate New York. So it was fun. I went to Washington, DC 101. We put that on the air, got it going. It was a big success, 3 years.
Now, when you went to DC 101, as you went there just as program director, or were you a part of the Burkhart Abrams? Were you a partner then?
No. I was the PD, and we, unfortunately for me, or fortunately, there was a conflict with some Baltimore station, and there was an argument between the owner of the station and Kent and Lee, which was a stupid argument. This was an AM station. Right. We were consulting up there. But the fact is, they fired Burkhart Abrams, and so it was very difficult for me to get a job at Burkhart Abrams after that, because there was a real question of my loyalty. And I said, "Look, someone asked me if I could program a station by myself." I said, "I can't lie."
Exactly.
And I told Kent Burkhart, I said, "Kent, I'm always loyal to whomever pays me." And he was like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. That's a good answer."
Right.
So and then I went to Burkhart Abrams. As you know, I was there for 25 years or whatever it was, and it was crazy.
Now, for some people that may not know, I mean, Burkhart Abrams was a radio consultant, which came up with the Superstars format back in the 70s. They used to program, or they used to be the consultant for QFM 97 from like 75 to 80, and right on through the 97 Rock early days with George Harris as PD, right. And John McGann, right? That was for the QFM era. And
I remember another Johnny. What's another Johnny?
Johnny Velshoff.
It was there. Yeah. But Johnny was there, the program director. So yeah, I worked with many of those guys. So there you go.
And Burkhart Abrams had at the height of your success there. I mean, how many stations did you guys consult?
150 stations. between all the different formats. When I first joined Burkhardt Abrams, I was sitting around the country to put disco stations on them.
Wow.
So that was kind of like a strange thing. Is when they did the disco demolition in Chicago, I was like, "You're killing me here. I got 7 disco stations I'm consulting." And of course, we know what happened to disco. But we were very successful in converting the disco stations to rhythmic pop stations like Kiss in Boston and places like that. KTU lasted the longest because the New York audience never disliked disco. They just reoriented themselves a little bit. That's all. And so it was such a trip. It's such a great history and such a learning experience. I got a chance to do radio in New Zealand, and I got a chance to go to France and England and work with Virgin Radio and Fun Radio in France. It was great. It was such a great, exciting, stimulating kind of life. But it was tough on you because, when you have 4 kids and a wife back home and you're traveling all the time, that's a recipe for divorce for sure. But the good news is that I'm really tight with my family and my ex-wife. And
who in the radio business doesn't have an ex-wife? You know what I mean? It's part of being in the business.
Right. Well, it goes along with each ex-job sometimes.
Exactly. Now, was Lee Michaels, was he passed away by the time you were involved with Burkhardt Abrams?
Yeah, Lee was already there. If you remember, Lee had been hired way before me, and so the firm eventually ended up being Burkhardt Abrams, Michaels, Douglas.
Right.
And yes, I was part of the team there when
you were the brains behind it all.
I wouldn't say that. I was the comedy writer behind all that. Yeah, so. No, but Lee tragically was killed in a car accident right around Christmas, and it was very sad for all of us. And it changed my perspective on life a lot. Like Lee was notorious for never wearing a seatbelt in his Porsche. So the rest is history.
Unfortunately, yeah, I met Lee once when he was came in 97 Rock. This is back in the early '80s, and all I remember about him is he had long hair and he had a business suit on with cowboy boots, and that's what I remember about Lee Michaels.
And a cowboy hat. And always a cowboy hat.
And always the cowboy hat. Yeah.
No, I was just going to say that his real name is Tommy Albright. He's just from a combination of Dallas and Houston, and so Dallas and Nashville, and he really did live that sort of cowboy persona, and it's just too bad. It's a very sad story. But anyway, life goes on. We moved forward, and we ended up being changing the name of our company again, and then finally it got down to Burkhardt Douglas, and then finally the firm was sold to Mike McVeigh's company, and we all sort of went our own private way. So, and that's the way it works.
Now, when you were at DC 101, I know you hired this guy named Howard Stern. How did that all go down?
Well, actually, what happened is I had been at DC 101 and then was left there, obviously, and ended up going into the consulting business. And then a few years later, the regime had changed to DC 101, and they were going to bring in a new general manager, and they wanted a new program director. And I said, well, the program director you should get is Denise Oliver. And they got her from Baltimore, and she came in, and she took the reins. And then as a consultant, I had recommended Howard Stern. And Denise is the person who found Robin Quivers in Baltimore and put them together. So that, too, was a very fortuitous hire and combo. And that became very successful. But as much as I love Howard, and he and I still talk, it's funny to me how Howard Stern was very successful, and I really enjoyed being part of all that. But I have to say, I was a part of a lot of morning shows.
Who were some of the other people?
Bob and Tom.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob and Tom in Indianapolis.
Right.
Brian and Brian. What's the names in L.A.? Mark and Brian at KLOS.
Yep.
Terry Stone at KFJO. and the two guys in Houston at KLOL. So, needless to say, one of the things that you do as a consultant is you hear a good idea over here and you spread it over here. So
right.
I still love the phrase, that the tagline that Howard Stern gave me, calling me the tampon of radio, that I would go into a market and suck all the good ideas away from one station and send them over to another station. I mean, part of that is true. That's part of what you do in America to make money.
Well, yeah. I mean, if it works, if you get a good idea and it works in the same format in one market, you try it in another market, and it goes. I mean, it still happens today. I mean, it's still the way it goes.
Yeah, but I always tell the story. It's funny. When I first got to WWDC and DC 101, they had a PD that came in from K-How in Denver, and K-How used to have this idea: KHOW Denver and How, like K-How and How, right?
Yeah.
So I'm listening to WWDC, the AM station, and the PD has them saying WWDC Washington and How. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
The consultant says. I was like, whoa, what? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So you can't take every idea,
Right. It's got to fit. It's stupid. Yeah. I'm sure that guy didn't last.
He didn't. I took his job.
So where was Stern? Where was Stern when you hired him? Where did he come? Where was he at that point?
Well, what happened is Lee Michaels was consulting HCN in Hartford, and he was at WCCC in Hartford.
Okay.
And Lee came off the road and was very frustrated with Hartford. He didn't feel that they were doing as well as they should be doing. And I said, well, what's the problem? He said, I'll tell you, this stupid morning guy over at WCCC telling us, I wish we could get him out of the market. So I sent him a letter saying, hey, send me a tape. I heard you were really good. And he sent a tape. I listened to it, and I sent a note back saying, hey, you're freaking great, man. You need to get to a bigger market. And so I called him, and I said, I got an opportunity for you at W4 in Detroit. I said, it's going to be very, very difficult. There's 4 or 5, 8 rock stations already.
Right.
You'd have to really help that station stand out by doing a great morning show. So he said, okay. So he takes the gig, and he goes there. And I remember going to Detroit and having dinner with him the 2 days after John Lennon was killed. And he was going on and on about how great the show was going, about how well, what he had done. He had, shown all this anger, and the audience was really involved in the discussion and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I'm really enjoying communicating and talking to people.
Right.
It's not just playing records.
So this is why he kind of transformed himself into more of a personality, I guess you could say, as more than just a disc jockey. Yeah.
Right. As I say, each station, less music, more talk. So anyway, as we got to DC 101, I called him up and I said, hey, I got this gig in Washington. You'd be great. I mean, think about all the people in Capitol Hill can hear a radio announcer in Washington and everything. And he was very reluctant. He says, no, I'm going to hang in there. I really feel this is working. I said, okay. Then the next thing I know, they changed the station to country.
Oh.
And I was like, what are you doing? This is crazy. You can't do country. No, I'm doing this. Hopple on Howard or whatever, and blah, 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 blah. I said, Howard, it's not going to work.
No.
So what happened is he did it for about a week or two, and then he called me up and he said, okay, let's go. Let's do it. So then Denise got in touch with him and put the team together in Washington. So that's really the whole story. And it was a very interesting progression because I realized that he was going to be big. And then once he got to Washington, I thought, how do I keep him there? So when NBC was calling him and he always wanted to do radio in his home market in New York City, I said, no, stay in Washington. You can open up Howard Stern pizza parlors. You'll make a ton of money and this whole thing. I was trying to talk him into it.
Right.
He left, and then we got Greaseman from Jacksonville go up to Charlotte and Jacksonville to go up to Washington, and that's the end of that story over there. So, but I really I think that's the thing I really enjoyed most of all in my radio career is seeing people that were talented being put together in the right situation two guys from Ypsilanti, Michigan, moving into Indianapolis and having Bob and Tom on the air. And I went back to my notebooks and I saw so many of the famous comedians, Roseanne Barr and all these different people, had been guests on their show because they were so tight with the comedy community in Indianapolis, and
Right.
everybody went through Indy on their way to Chicago. So that really opened my eyes to the fact that morning shows, if they truly are funny and they can attract funny people to the show, that's the winner. You can't beat that. That's real good local radio. And with Bob and Tom and Howard and a lot of these shows, they do translate to syndication. But the fact is that to do great local radio and topical radio and have some sort of meaningful discussion with the audience, hey, that's what radio is supposed to be. I'm sorry it's moved away from that, but hey, life goes on.
You had a good ear for talent, it sounds like, and putting morning shows together.
I appreciate that. I think putting people together, I learned my lesson the hard way at Z93 when I left consulting and I was doing the PD gig again, which I did for 3 years in Washington. In Atlanta. I wanted to get off the road, and it was good. It was 3 years. As I say, the first year was fabulous. The second year was challenging, and the third year was hell. And then I went away, just like any other PD would when the ratings went a little bit down, whatever.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, I learned a big lesson about how hard it is and how much business at that point, Mel Karmazin, we would sell everything that we possibly could. And at the time, the temperature, this, and so it really became such a stuffed package that I'm not sure it was as listenable as it was in the old radio days. But the bottom line is, I don't take any blame or I don't take any credit for anything other than the fact that radio is its own monster. And as Andrew Economos of RCS said one time, it's the only industry I know that eats its young. I thought that was a really great line, and I say it whenever anyone leaves a radio station. It's like, just remember, the industry is designed to eat its young. The industry is not designed to help you personally unless you're a superstar, and then if you are, you can make all the money in the world. But I think as I progressed and I got to the point where I left radio and went into the software business with RCS, I realized that technically things were going to change, and they were going to change rapidly. And you can blame whatever shift or fad that comes along on the demise of any industry. But, my father was a milkman. Well, there aren't milkmen today.
No.
But if you want to get milk, you can pick up the phone and somebody will come deliver milk to your door.
Exactly.
But he's not a milkman or milkwoman. He's a delivery person from Uber or whatever. So you just go along with the flow. But the fact is that people will always find other ways of learning about music or sampling music or buying music. And just this morning, I saw the show, the closing ceremonies on the Olympics with Phoenix doing 1901. And I said, wow, that's a great song. I forgot about that. And so I went on Apple, iTunes this morning and downloaded it. So that's where we are today. We don't have to go anywhere to find music. We'll find it.
Well, we've got a whole generation of people growing up now that don't even listen to the radio. So, there's so much competition with radio. You've got, all these streaming services, Pandora. You've got satellite radio. You've got 18,000 television stations. And like you said, there's iTunes. And radio's been losing a listenership for a long time. But I think deregulation also was a big factor. You have these big chains now, like the last one I worked for, which will remain nameless. All they're concerned about is their stock is in the crapper, and all they're concerned about is, their profit to loss ratio on Wall Street. And they're not coming from where you and I came from, with a love for radio, for broadcasting, for music, for the talent. It's all they might as well be selling hot dogs. You know what I mean? That's the sad part to me.
They are selling hot dogs. They are, but think of it this way: America's a strange place, and let's use that hot dog scenario. Joey Chestnut is clearly the best person, the most talented hot dog eater in the world.
No doubt.
No one would dispute that. But he doesn't compete anymore. And one thing about America, I was saying this the other day, it's a concept of where we encourage greatness. We encourage you to be the best that you can do. And then when you get really good, you become really big. And when you become really big, the Justice Department walks in and says, hey, you're too big. It's a weird thing, isn't it? Everything that you do to become big, and then the government has this weird, it's either bribed into the system or it's guilted into the system, that somehow we have to deregulate something because it got too regulated until that industry becomes totally out of the whack, and then everybody has to run back in and try to re-regulate it. It's a very strange thing. And in most cases, I'm kind of like a capitalist with democratic and libertarian viewpoints most of the time. But there are times when I say to myself, what are these people doing? They're going to ruin the very thing that brought America to the successful level. Politics politics is like radio. If you think about it too much, you're going to get crazy.
Exactly. There's no easy answer, on how to fix it, and if it's even fixable at this point. But they deregulate the hell out of everything. They take away all the rules. Capitalism works, but you got to have rules of the road, or like you said, it gets out of whack. And I remember when I started in the late 70s, you could only own 17 stations, 1 AM and 1 FM in the same market. I think it was. If you bought a station, you had to own it for 7 years. And now it's like you got these chains that own 300 stations, and and they're also killing the talent pool for tomorrow, because like they don't even have, like when I started out, and probably when you started out, you did the all-night show on the weekends. Then you got the all-night show. You were able to work on your craft. And, now everything is fucking voice tracked. You sit in a room and you record a 5-hour show in 45 minutes. And, I just don't understand how you grow by doing that, And then if you throw in syndicated shows, there's just how many radio broadcasters were put out by Rush Limbaugh? How many guys didn't have a local talk show because we had all these syndicated shows, which are cheaper for the radio stations to pay than to pay a local talk show host and pay his health insurance and whatnot. So, I mean, we could go on and on, but to me, that's some of the sad parts of everything. Would you agree or not?
The point is, yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think that the bottom line to all that is that if it gets ratings, it'll be successful. So the only way out of anything, like, for example, I heard Howard the other day on Sirius, and he was complaining about the demise of radio, and I thought that's kind of a funny thing, because and I respect what he was saying, is that he was basically saying, yeah, I got out of radio just in the right time. And I'm thinking, this is bizarre. I'm listening to him on the radio. It's just a different kind of radio.
Right.
So right. I'm listening to this and I'm saying, yes, you're right. But the bottom line is the people who want to bring back radio, they have to understand that to have these electronic tubes or whatever they are today, broadcasting through copper wire into a big antenna into a radio in a car or whatever, you're going to have to spend money to do that. And radio has already turned the curve. And when you talk about voice tracking of one disc jockey doing 20 stations or whatever, it's going to be 0 disc jockey, because they're going to figure out how to take AI and have the AI actually do all the intros and outros, and the AI DJ will be perfect. Will hit the post and not talk over the lyrics, and he's going to be perfect or she's going to be perfect, but it's not going to be a real person. And that's why the labor yard during the strike, after and SAG, to try to keep that from happening, because inevitably that's the plan. And quite frankly, my analogy is a blow-up doll. If you want to have sex with a blow-up doll, go have sex with a blow-up doll. But would you please just admit that it's not a real person? Okay?
True. Yes.
If it's not real radio and you're listening to it, that's on you. That's all you need to be satisfied with. That's on you.
Well, yeah, they bring down the bar. They lower the bar, and AI, yes, it's probably going to replace us all. Hopefully, I'm retired by that time. But you wonder how well that's going to do, though. I mean, how well can that really? Is the next Howard Stern going to be an AI guy created from AI? I don't think so. I think there's still something there. At least maybe I'm a romantic, but I would like to think the human element still is going to matter somehow. But who the hell knows?
You are a romantic, Tom.
I know. What the hell's wrong with me?
There's nothing wrong with it. Hey, the thing about it is when you say, is that really going to do well? It doesn't have to do well. It's a little bit like a jukebox. Is there a human being inside the jukebox?
No.
The one thing that makes the jukebox work is that humans are putting their money in and choosing songs. But there's no human inside making that a more engaging or exciting experience. So, that's where we're going. And yeah, it's too bad. I tell people all the time, I say, hey, my son wants to go in radio. I'm like, why? What are you straighten him out? Should be going to TV or cable or be trying to work with the internet or understanding the technology of tomorrow. And none of that has anything to do with radio. Local radio is still important. When you go to some of these rural areas where the radio is the first place where they learn about the tornado, that's damn important to a farmer. But even our farm cume, so to speak, has dropped so much. Fewer and fewer people are actually working the farm. It's so automated, like everything else in the world.
Yeah.
So, but again, thing is, find a way to communicate. This is my advice to radio people.
Right.
You're doing it with this podcast. That's what you need to do. Find a way to communicate, and you'll be happy. Don't sit around just complaining about it. Go do something. Do a podcast. Paint. Write. I publish a book a year. I have no idea why. I don't have that many readers, but I have 9 books out. My 10th will be coming out shortly. My new book is called Nothing Happens for a Reason. It's a real positive look at the negative aspect of human beings.
Wow. That sounds intense.
Yeah, it's going to be a terrible book, but I'm publishing it anyway because I want to say something.
Now, what about the book on radio you were talking about doing true stories of? You've already done one.
I'm only going to do one book on the radio, and I did it. True Radio Confessions: Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll. It is I use a format in the book that disturbs a lot of people, and that is that it's like a Forrest Gump novel, Forrest Gump movie, of where he ends up showing up at seemingly all the right places at the right time, all these famous events and things.
Okay.
It's a little bit like that. The character, the fictitious character, is not me. It's a made-up radio guy, but it's a conglomeration of all the radio guys that I've known over the years. And a lot of it's me, my story as well. But the fact is that I have people all the time that come up to me and they're like, hey, I read your book. I had no idea you went to the University of Dayton. I said, I didn't. The character went to the University of Dayton. It's funny. It's funny.
It's fiction, yes.
But there are people in there. Like there's Charlie Miner in there, and there's all these different people, musicians and people and stuff. So, I mean, I always tell people that if you spend any time with me on the road or in business or whatever, you should read the book because you'll figure out whether you're in it. You'll know the story. You'll know if you're in it.
True Radio Confessions is the name of the book, and all your books, I believe, are DwightDouglas.com. You've written books on art. One of them is how to hire people. What's that all about?
Yeah, that's actually a really good book. I hate to sound like I'm hyping my own stuff, but that how to hire great people, it is a great book. I mean, I've sent it to a lot of companies. I know Publix, the grocery store chain, they wrote back after I sent a copy to them. It's a good how to get through the hiring interviewing process. It talks a lot about the laws and regulations in the United States and which ones not to break.
So what are the main things you look for when you're trying to hire somebody besides that, they don't have an arrest record or, what are the main things that you look for?
Well, I don't care if they have an arrest record as long as they can explain why they got arrested. And they can do it in a funny communicative way.
As long as they get numbers. It's all about the numbers. Yeah.
That's right. It's like that famous story in Major League Baseball where two guys, in baseball, players always share rooms. They have roommates. They've always done that system from the beginning.
Right.
So this was like in the 30s, and the guy decided to go out because he was a real woman guy, and he comes back drunk at about 3 o'clock in the morning, falls in bed next to his bunkmate, and all of a sudden there's a knock at the door, real loud knock, and the players say, "Who is it?" This is Ralph. You stole my wife. I didn't steal your wife. What are you talking about? And he opens the door, and the guy's standing there with a gun, and they wrestle the gun away from the guy, the husband, and they shoot him dead.
Wow.
So obviously the player that had been out late, the alleged womanizer, was kept in town for a couple of days, and then when they got back to their home market, the guy comes walking right into the locker room. He says, I thought he was arrested on murder charges. And the manager looks at the players and says, winks and says, "Hey, if you can throw a good fastball, you can get away with murder."
All right.
And that's a little bit like radio. But to answer your question seriously, when you're interviewing somebody, you need to do a lot of work before you get to that point. You need to do a little research on the why behind things. It's like J.C. Corcoran was always famous. I think you remember him.
Yeah, I used to do mornings at 97 Rock back in the day. J.C. Yep.
Right? And he was fired at a lot of places. I mean, he was fired in Buffalo because he said the old joke that the reason why Catholic girls wear patent leather shoes is so you can look up their dress.
Unbelievable.
I mean, that is the most childish, stupid thing, right?
Yeah.
But the problem was the manager, Jimmy, was a choir boy at the church. The priest calls, who's now a bishop, and says, "Hey, blah, 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 blah."
Right.
I think JC, the first person in Buffalo was fired because of the Catholic Church. Look, the whole thing is, you're going to make mistakes when you hire people. You never know what ghost the person has. I mean, I've had guys that on paper look perfectly great, look like it's going to be the hire of the century, and 2 weeks into it, they implode. I've had other people that everybody was against. I remember hiring somebody in the software business, and my assistant at that time said, "I don't like him. I don't want him hired." I said, "Why not?" He said, "Because he doesn't wear socks." I said, "Really?
Who cares?
Really?"
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have socks. He's a great web designer. Well, yes, I did hire him. He was great. And 12 months later, he was hired away for 3 times the money I was paying him.
Wow.
So I wish I could have held him on longer. But I guess just because you don't wear socks doesn't mean it can't be great.
And that's the moral of that story. You don't need socks. Who needs socks? Who needs clothes? Yeah.
We don't need no stinking socks.
That's right. I do this podcast in my underwear. Who cares? You know, as long as people are listening. Right. So go. I'm sorry, exactly. Dwight. I interrupted you. Go ahead, sir.
No. That's the conclusion of that segment on hiring people. It appears to be an off-brand book for me, but I give it. It's my new graduation present. When one of my nieces, nephews, or friends of the family graduates from high school or college, I send them that book. And they're all like, well, this is about hiring someone. I said, no, get with the program. If you know what their tricks are on the other side of the desk, what are they trying to get you to do? Or what are they trying to get you to say? You will be able to be a better hire because of that. And I said, and by the way, do you never want to be in management? This is a book that says, hey, I want to be in management someday. How do I do that? So it's not just a book for the owner or the boss. It's a book for anybody. I recommend it for anybody who's going to do it. I mean, it's gonna run out of its currentism because things are mercurial. Things will change in every business, but anyway, for right now, it's very up to date, very good.
I never wanted to be in management. I just I don't know. The whole getting up early thing for me was it just didn't work for me. I just wanted to be the night guy, and it worked for a long time. Well, Dwight, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir. Yes.
No. I was just going to say how much I enjoyed talking to you and how much I enjoyed being one of the early adopters of your podcast.
That's right.
And I really wish you nothing but success. And I hope that people understand that not all radio people end up going to podcasts, but the ones that do, please listen to them because they have something to say.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Dwight. We're breaking Sherry here today. It is our first ever interview here on Slick's Open Bar with Dwight Douglas. Dwight, when you finish your next book, we'll come on again. You got to make that true radio sex, drugs, and rock and roll book. That's got to be a screenplay. I mean, there's got to be a movie in there, I'm thinking.
Well, it's funny you should say that. I sent it to Anthony Scaramucci, who invests in movies. I don't know if people know that about him.
Did not know that.
And I said to him, I said, Anthony, I got 2 words for you. Movie. And, of course, the joke is that's one word.
Right.
So there you go.
So, good luck with that. Would be cool, man. That would definitely, there hasn't been really too many good radio movies. Although I am a fan of FM, even though it's totally unrealistic. I love the characters in that movie. Of course,
I have to tell you, I had an opportunity to read the original screenplay before Hollywood mucked it up.
Right.
But it's really a good play. I mean, she did a great job on it, and it's too bad that. Well, it's not too bad. It's a movie. It wasn't that successful. It probably would have been more successful had they just left the screenplay the way it was.
So they screwed up. They screwed up the script. They took shortcuts, changed it.
Yeah, I think what happened. And I hate to say this as a consultant, but I think they end up using too much research to bend the story at the end. And there are so many movies that have been changed because of focus groups and things like that.
People want a stupid ending or whatever. The audience likes a stupid ending, so let's change this and make it a stupid ending.
Or they just use the focus group to do what they wanted to do in the first place. They just use it as justification.
There you go.
Well, it didn't test well, and it didn't test well.
Well, Dwight,
buddy, you have a great.
I appreciate you taking the time to come on here. It takes guts to come on this Slick Cast. We're breaking Sherry today. Dwight Douglas. You can check out all his books at dwightdouglas.com. Radio consultant and artist. You paint as well. I know you got a book on Picasso, right? You're all over the place.
Oh, yeah, Yeah, the book on Picasso is great. I have to tell you, it's a perfect coffee table book. Christmas is coming. It would be a great thing. It makes you look like you know what you're talking about.
DwightDouglas.com. Dwight, really appreciate you coming on, man. Thanks a lot, brother.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.